come closer, and let the noise of the day fade away. Allow yourself to settle in, to find comfort, as we journey back in time, far beyond the reach of recorded memory, to a land nestled between two great rivers. This is Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, a name that echoes through millennia, meaning the land between the rivers. Here, in the Fertile Crescent, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flow like twin serpents through the dust, our story begins. Imagine a vast, sun-drenched plain. For thousands of years, it was a quiet landscape, home only to reeds, rustling in the wind, and the gentle lapping of water against muddy banks. But slowly, imperceptibly, a change began. Hunter-gatherers, drawn by the life-giving water and the rich, dark soil deposited by annual floods, started to linger. They learned to coax life from the earth, planting the first seeds of barley and wheat. Small villages sprouted like the very crops they nurtured, dotting the riverbanks with the first flickers of permanent settlement. This was a world taking its first breath. A world where survival was a daily conversation with the elements, the generous sun, the vital water, the unpredictable floods. These early people looked at the world around them with a sense of awe and wonder. They saw the divine in the shimmer of the river at dawn, in the fury of a dust storm, and in the silent, watchful gaze of the moon. Their world was alive with gods and spirits, powerful, often fickle beings who held the fate of humanity in their hands. It is in this land, under this sky, that the first cities known to humankind rose from the earth. Places like Eridu, Uruk, and Ur. These were not just overgrown villages. They were bustling hubs of innovation, commerce, and belief. Picture mud brick walls soaring towards the heavens, creating a sanctuary from the wildness outside. Within these walls, life unfolded in a complex tapestry. Streets, narrow and winding, teemed with people merchants haggling over goods from distant lands, artisans crafting pottery with newfound skill, and priests murmuring incantations to appease the gods. At the heart of each city stood a testament to their faith, a colossal, stepped pyramid reaching for the sky. It was a man-made mountain, a bridge between the earthly realm and the celestial home of the gods. Upon its summit, in a sacred shrine, priests conducted rituals, observed the stars, and listened for divine whispers on the wind. They believed the city's patron god or goddess lived there, a divine ruler watching over their mortal subjects. The Ziggurat was more than a building. It was the city's anchor, its spiritual and physical center, a constant reminder of the cosmic order they strive to understand. But how do we know these stories? How can we hear the voices of a people who lived over 5,000 years ago? The answer lies in one of their most profound inventions, writing. It began not with poetry or history, but with simple necessity. Priests in the temples needed a way to keep track of grain, sheep, and jars of oiled offerings that sustained the temple and, by extension, the city. They began to press wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets, a system we now call cuneiform. Initially, these marks were simple pictures, pictograms, representing an object. A drawing of a head of barley meant barley. But a revolutionary leap occurred when these symbols began to represent sounds. Suddenly, the spoken word could be frozen in time, captured on a small tablet of clay. The full spectrum of human experience could be recorded. Contracts, royal decrees, personal letters, medical texts, and epic tales of heroes and gods. With the invention of writing, history itself was born. The silent past found its voice. This new tool allowed for the organization of society on a scale never before imagined. Laws could be codified and displayed for all to see, creating a sense of justice and order that extended beyond the whims of a single ruler. The most famous of these, the Code of Hammurabi, would come later. But the foundations were laid here, in the early cities, as people grappled with the fundamental questions of how to live together. How to be fair. How to build a society that was more than just a collection of individuals, but a cohesive whole. Yet, for all that we have deciphered from these clay tablets, Mesopotamia remains a land of profound mystery. We read of legendary kings like Gilgamesh, a ruler so mighty he was said to be Tuthar's god, who journeyed to the ends of the earth in search of immortality. Was he a real king, a myth, or a blend of both? We see intricate seals depicting strange, hybrid creatures and enigmatic rituals whose true meanings are lost to time. We unearth tombs filled with breathtaking treasures, but also with the remains of retainers and soldiers, a silent testament to beliefs about the afterlife that we can only guess at. What drove these people to build such monumental structures? What were their deepest fears, their greatest hopes? They gazed at the same stars we see today, but they saw in them a different story, a cosmic drama that directly influenced their lives. They charted the movements of the planets, developed complex mathematics, and laid the groundwork for astronomy, all in an effort to comprehend the will of the gods and find their place in the universe. Their world was a tapestry woven from the practical and the divine, the known and the unknowable. As we stand at the threshold of their story, we are met with a silence that is not empty, but filled with the echoes of their achievements and the shadows of their unanswered questions. The rhythm of this land is dictated by water. Twice a year, the great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, swell with melted snow from the distant mountains. Their currents, once placid, become powerful and brown with silt, overflowing their banks and spreading across the flat plains. This isn't a gentle, predictable rise. It's a sudden, chaotic inundation, a force of both creation and destruction. The floodwaters recede as quickly as they arrive, leaving behind a glistening, dark layer of immensely fertile soil. This annual gift is the secret to life here, the promise of abundance in an otherwise harsh landscape. But to harness it requires patience and ingenuity. To control the wildness of the rivers, the first people here began to observe. To learn the subtle language of the water, they dug small channels, coaxing the floodwaters away from their settlements and into their fields. Over generations, these simple ditches grew into a complex network of canals, arteries of life branching out across the plain. You can almost hear the soft splash and gurgle as water is diverted through a sluice gate, flowing steadily down a narrow, hand-dug channel, quenching the thirst of the barley and wheat. The air smells of wet earth and growing things, a scent of life itself. It was this mastery of water, this quiet, collaborative effort, that allowed for surplus. For the first time, not everyone had to farm. In the Sud, where the rivers slow and fan out, before meeting the sea, the landscape transforms into a world of Here, dense thickets of giant reeds rise from the shallow water, their feathery tops whispering in the breeze. The air is humid, filled with the calls of unseen birds and the hum of insects. Life in the marshes moves to a different rhythm. People build their homes directly on the water, creating floating islands of woven reeds, or constructing arched houses from bundles of the same pliable material. These structures, known as mudhaif, are masterpieces of natural architecture, cool in the heat and resilient. Their design has remained almost unchanged for thousands of years. The people here are masters of the skiff, pulling their slender boats through the labyrinthine waterways, fishing and hunting waterfowl. The scent of reeds and damp earth is everywhere, a constant reminder of this unique, waterlogged world. Away from the rivers and the marshes, the land stretches out into a semi-arid steppe. For much of the year, it is a palette of beige and ochre, baked hard by the sun. Hardy grasses and thorny shrubs cling to life, and the air shimmers with heat. But after the winter rains, a fleeting miracle occurs. The steppe explodes into a carpet of green and wildflowers, a brief but spectacular burst of life. Small herds of gazelle and onager graze on the temporary bounty. In this landscape, you might stumble upon a low mound, a tell, rising unnaturally from the flat plain. It doesn't look like much. Perhaps just a hillock of earth littered with broken pottery. But beneath the surface lie the compressed layers of countless generations. These mounds are the ghosts of the first villages. If you were to listen closely, you might almost hear the echoes of their existence. The rhythmic scrape of a flint sickle harvesting grain. The low murmur of voices exchanging goods. The gentle thud of clay being shaped into a pot. It was in these small, unassuming settlements that the seeds of civilization were sown. Someone discovered that mixing chopped straw with the river mud created a stronger, more durable brick. Someone else figured out how to fire clay in a kiln, making it waterproof. Each small innovation, each quiet improvement, was a step on the path to something new. They learned to observe the sky, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and stars to create a calendar, essential for knowing when to plant and when to expect the floods. They developed simple tools for measuring their fields and calculating their yields. There was no grand plan, no single moment of invention. It was a slow, organic process of trial and error, of shared knowledge passed down through generations. The population grew, villages expanded, and the intricate dance of cooperation became more complex. Small shrines built to honor the forces of nature, the sun, the water. The fertile earth grew larger and more elaborate, becoming the focal points of community life. Underneath the dust of millennia, these innovations lie waiting. You can feel their presence. A slight depression in the ground might mark a buried canal. A scatter of dark, vitrified slag could be the remains of an early metalsmith's workshop. The very soil is an archive of human endeavor. The air itself seems to hold a memory of the shift, the moment when these scattered villages began to coalesce, drawing closer together. The pull of the temple, the security of a shared wall, the opportunities of a bustling market hall. These forces were slowly, inexorably drawing people in from the surrounding plains. The quiet hum of village life was beginning to swell, transforming into the complex, resonant chord of the city. The first light of urban life was dawning on the horizon, casting long shadows back across the fields and marshes. A future being built, brick by sun-dried brick. The soft, fertile land between the two rivers continued to breathe life into new ways of being. Along the banks of the Euphrates and the Tigris, clusters of settlements began to swell, not just in size, but in complexity and ambition. This was the dawn of the city-state, a revolutionary concept where a city was not just a large town, but a sovereign entity, a world unto itself. Imagine standing on the plains and seeing, for the first time, a city like Uruk, rising from the horizon. Its walls, eventually stretching for miles, were not just for defense. They were a statement. They declared, here is Uruk. Here, a new order has begun. Inside these walls, life pulsed with an organized rhythm, previously unknown. At the very heart of Uruk, and of cities like Yor and Lagash, stood the temple. This wasn't just a place of worship. The temple was the city's spiritual and economic core, a grand household dedicated to the city's patron deity. It was believed that the god or goddess literally owned the land, and the people were their stewards. This belief shaped what we call a temple economy. The temple precinct became a massive administrative center, a hub of collection and redistribution. Farmers brought a portion of their harvest barley, wheat, dates as offerings, which were then stored in vast temple granaries. This surplus was the engine of the city. It fed not only the priests and priestesses who managed the templest affairs, but also a new class of people who didn't work the fields, the craftsmen. In workshops clustered around the temple complex, artisans honed their skills. Potters, no longer just making simple vessels for home use, now created standardized bowls on a mass scale, perhaps used for doling out rations to temple workers. Weavers spun wool into textiles that became one of Sumer's most important exports. Jewelers worked with imported gold and lapis lazuli, creating intricate adornments for the elite and the gods. Stonemasons carved statues with wide, inlaid eyes that seemed to gaze into eternity. This specialization was a luxury afforded by the agricultural surplus. A man could dedicate his entire life to becoming a master carpenter because he knew the temple granaries held the barley that would feed his family. But where did the lapis lazuli and the fine woods for carving come from? Not from the flat plains of Sumer. This need for resources sparked the engine of long-distance trade. Sumerian merchants, organized into expeditions likely sponsored by the temple or the ruling elite, embarked on arduous journeys. They traveled by donkey caravan overland to the mountains of modern-day Iran and Turkey, and by boat down the Persian Gulf to lands known as Dilmun and Megan, perhaps Bahrain and Oman. They traded the surplus of their civilization grain, textiles, finished goods for the raw materials they lacked, copper and tin to make bronze, gold for decoration, stone for building, and hardwood for construction. This was not simple bartering. It was a complex system of exchange that required trust and accountability over vast distances. How could a temple administrator in Uruk be sure that a shipment of wool sent to a trading partner 1,000 miles away had been received correctly? The answer came in a burst of administrative genius. The cylinder seal. Each important individual, a merchant, a priest, an official, had a small, personal stone cylinder intricately carved with a unique design. When a storeroom door was sealed with a lump of wet clay, or a clay tablet detailing a transaction was written, the official would roll their cylinder seal across the clay. This left a distinct impression, a signature that was difficult to forge. It was a mark of ownership, a guarantee of authenticity, a lock and a signature all in one. Thousands of these seals and their impressions have been found, each a tiny window into the bustling, bureaucratic life of these early cities. As the cities grew wealthier and more powerful, so did their ambition to honor their gods. The simple, ground-level temples began to evolve. The Sumerians started building raised platforms to elevate their temples, lifting them closer to the heavens where the gods were thought to reside. Over time, they began to stack these platforms, one on top of the other, each level smaller than the one below. This created a towering, stepped structure with a temple at its summit. This was the ziggurat, the signature architectural form of ancient Mesopotamia. The ziggurat was more than just a big building. It was a man-made mountain on the flat river plain, a symbolic link between the earthly and the divine. Climbing its steep staircases was a spiritual ascent, a journey from the human world to the sacred realm. From Heat's Peak, the priests could observe the stars, and the city's ruler could look down upon the ordered grid of streets, canals, and fields. Testament to human ingenuity and devotion, these ziggurats dominated the skyline, visible 4 miles around, a constant reminder to all of the power of the city as God and the organizing principle that held their world together. The city-state was not just a place to live. It was a cosmos in miniature, carefully constructed and held in a delicate, managed balance. In the quiet hum of early cities, another revolution was taking shape, one not of bronze or stone, but of clay and thought. Before symbols graced tablets, there were tokens, small, sculpted pieces of clay, each with a distinct shape. A cone for a small measure of grain, a sphere for a larger one, an ovoid for a jar of oil, a disc with an incised cross for a sheep. These were not mere counters. They were tangible ideas, a physical language of goods. For a shepherd taking his flock to distant pastures, he would receive a collection of tokens representing each animal. These tokens, a silent contract, were then sealed within a hollow clay ball. A bula. Imagine holding one of these bula, feeling its weight and the faint rattling from within. To verify the contents, the bula had to be broken. But what if you didn't want to break it? What if you wanted a permanent record? An ingenious step was taken. Before sealing the tokens inside, scribes would press each token onto the wet clay surface of the bula, creating an impression of the contents. A cone left a small wedge shape, a sphere, a circular mark. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The scribes realized the impressions on the outside made the tokens on the inside redundant. The external marks were enough. The symbol had detached from the object it represented. This was the birth of abstract counting, the very seed of writing. From these simple impressions, the system blossomed. The bula was flattened into a tablet. The pointed stylus used to press the tokens was replaced with a reed cut at an angle, which, when pressed into wet clay, created the elegant, wedge-shaped marks we call cuneiform, protocuneiform. Still very pictographic, slowly streamlined over centuries, a drawing of a head of grain became a few efficient wedge marks. A picture of a fish, a complex of intersecting lines. The symbols began to represent not just objects, but sounds, syllables from the Sumerian language. Suddenly, anything that could be spoken could be written. The glorious deeds of a king, the lament of a lover, the precise terms of a land sale. To master this complex art required immense dedication. Scribal schools, diadaba, or tablet houses, emerged. Young boys, and occasionally girls, spent their days from sunrise to sunset learning the hundreds of signs. They began by making basic tablets, learning to shape the clay, then moved on to endlessly copying signs, proverbs, and lists. The discipline was harsh, the lessons monotonous, but the prize was immense. A scribe was a master of information, an architect of memory, a vital cog in the machinery of civilization. They were the administrators, the accountants, the historians, the keepers of sacred texts. They were powerful. Through their meticulous work, another Sumerian invention flourished. The sexagesimal system, a base 60 numeral system. 60, it's a wonderfully divisible number, making fractions easy to calculate. We still feel its echo today, every time we look at a clock or a compass. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. This mathematical framework allowed Sumerian and later Babylonian astronomers to chart the heavens with breathtaking accuracy. They watched the moon wax and wane, meticulously recording its cycle to create lunar calendars. They tracked the paths of Venus and Jupiter, seeing them not just as specks of light, but as divine messengers whose movements held omens for the kingdom. They divided the year into 12 months, added leap months when necessary to keep the calendar aligned with the seasons, and named the constellations that wheeled overhead. All of this knowledge, these celestial observations and mathematical calculations, were pressed into clay, and so the archives grew. In the cool, dark storerooms of temples and palaces, rows upon rows of clay tablets rested on shelves, a silent library of a civilization's entire existence. Here were economic records, down to the last sheep, legal codes outlining justice, diplomatic letters between kings, and epic poems of gods and heroes. But there were also quieter things. Tablets containing a brewer's recipe for beer, a list of vocabulary words for a struggling student, a private prayer etched by an anxious heart, hoping for a good harvest or a safe journey. Each tablet, a small rectangle of baked earth, held a piece of a life, a fragment of a thought, a secret whispered across millennia. They were not just records. They were time capsules, patiently waiting in the dark, guarding the genesis of human memory, pressed into clay and hardened by fire, surviving the fall of empires to speak to us now. Enlil, the Lord of Wind, Air, and Earth, was a figure of immense power, his decrees shaping the destinies of both gods and mortals. He was the enforcer of the cosmic order, established by the divine assembly, and his temple at Nipa, Dieka, was considered the very bond between heaven and earth. His breath could be a gentle breeze that nurtured the crops, or a raging storm that brought devastation. It was this dual nature, this capacity for both creation and destruction, that made him so revered and feared. His decisions were often absolute, carrying the weight of destiny itself. Mortals understood that their prosperity, their very survival, depended on appeasing the great Enlil, for his temper was as unpredictable as the winds he commanded. In contrast to Enlil's often severe authority was his brother Enki, the lord of the Abzu, the freshwater ocean that lay beneath the earth. Enki was the god of wisdom, magic, and craftsmanship, where Enlil was order. Enki was ingenuity. He was the divine artisan, the keeper of the sacred me, the fundamental principles and technologies of civilization. It was said that he fashioned the first humans from clay, breathing life into them, not as slaves, but as caretakers of the world the gods had made. He was a trickster, a problem solver, and a friend to humanity, often intervening to save them from the harsher judgments of the other gods, a gentle counterpoint to his brother's stern rule. The stories of creation told of a time when heaven and earth were one, until Enlil separated them, carving out the world we know. But with creation came the potential for chaos. In the most famous of these tales, the gods, disturbed by the noise of a burgeoning human population, decided to wipe the slate clean. Enlil unleashed a great flood to cover the earth, a deluge of immense and terrifying scale. But Enki, ever the protector, whispered a warning to a wise man named Utnapishtim. He instructed him to build a great ark and to save his family, along with the seeds of all living things. When the waters finally receded, it was Utnapishtim's vessel that ensured life could begin anew, a testament to Enki's compassion and foresight. Among the most powerful goddesses was Inanna, queen of heaven and earth, known later as Ish. She was a deity of dazzling complexity, embodying both the passion of love and the fury of war. She was desire personified, a force of nature who could inspire poets and warriors alike. Yet, her ambition knew no bounds. One of the most profound myths is her descent to the netherworld, the realm ruled by her formidable sister Eri, driven by a desire to extend her power even over the land of the dead. Inanna adorned herself in her finest regalia and passed through the 7 gates of the underworld. At each gate, she was forced to surrender an item of her power, her crown, her jewels, her robes, until she arrived before Eri, stripped bare and vulnerable. There, she was judged and put to death, her body left hanging on a hook. The world above fell into despair. Crops failed, life ceased to procreate, and a sterile silence fell over the land. Seeing this devastation, the wise Enki intervened once more. He created 2 small asexual beings and sent them with the food and water of life to revive the fallen goddess. They soothed the grieving Ereshkigal with empathy, and in return, were granted Inanna's corpse. Sprinkled with the life-giving elements, Inanna rose again, her return to the world of the living, signaling the rebirth of nature and the return of fertility. This cycle of death and rebirth was not just a story. It was a ritual enacted throughout the land. Priests and priestesses would chant hymns, their voices rising with the smoke of fragrant incense, cedar, juniper, and myrrh, believed to please the gods and carry prayers to the heavens. Music was essential. The lyre, the harp, and the drum were not just for entertainment. They were instruments for sacred communication, their rhythms and melodies weaving a bridge between the mortal and divine realms. Temples were alive with sound, scent, and devotion, a sensory tapestry designed to draw the gods near. Dreams were another bridge. They were seen as direct messages, omens sent from the gods to guide, warn, or prophesy. A dream of a date palm might signify abundance, while a dream of a falling wall could portend disaster. Specialized priests, known as dream interpreters, would carefully analyze these nocturnal visions, seeking to understand the divine will and advise kings and commoners alike on their future paths. Every ripple in a river, every star in the night sky, was part of a larger, living narrative. The Tigris and Euphrates were not just rivers. They were the arteries of the gods, their annual floods both a life-giving blessing and a reminder of divine power. The constellations were celestial tablets on which the gods wrote the destinies of humanity, their movements tracked by astronomers who were also priests. These myths were etched into the very landscape. The sky, a canopy of stories. The earth, a stage for divine drama, leaving behind a legacy of wonder and mystery that still echoes through time. The dust of Sumer settles, but the winds of ambition are stirring again. From the north, from the city of Akkad, a new name echoes across the plains. Sargon, a man whose origins are shrouded in legend, a cupbearer who would become a king, a unifier who would forge the world's first true empire. He marches south, not just to conquer, but to weave together the disparate threads of Sumerian city-states into a single tapestry under his rule. His armies, disciplined and relentless, wash over the old walls. The era of the city-state is ending. The age of the Akkadian Empire has begun. Under his hand, trade routes lengthen, stretching from the cedar forests of Lebanon to the distant shores of the Indus Valley. A new order is established, a centralized power that redirects the wealth of the land towards its new heart. Akkad. The empire flourishes, a grand experiment in control and consolidation. But power, once seized, must be held. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, inherits this sprawling domain. He is not content to be merely a king. He proclaims himself a god, the god of Akkad. To signify this divine status, he wears a horned crown, a symbol previously reserved for the deities of the pantheon. On his victory stele, he is depicted larger than life, trampling his enemies underfoot as he ascends a mountain closer to the heavens. His gaze is fixed on the stars, a celestial ambition made manifest in stone. This is a profound shift, a declaration that the ruler is not just the chosen of the gods, but one of them, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The empire under Naram-Sin reaches its zenith, a colossus of bronze and clay. But But even mountains can erode, and the mightiest empires can crumble. From the Zagros Mountains to the east, a people called the Gutians descend, described in later texts as a plague. Their arrival shatters the centralized control of Akkad. They are a disruptive force, a storm that breaks the carefully constructed order. The great cities suffer, trade routes are severed, and the land fractures once more. This period, the Gutian Interlude, is remembered as a time of chaos, a dark age where the grand imperial project lay in ruins. Yet, even in this fragmentation, life goes on. Local rulers re-emerge, and in the south, the city of Lagash experiences a remarkable renaissance, a flickering light in the gathering gloom. The dream of empire is not forgotten, merely dormant, waiting for the storm to pass. As stability eventually returns, new dynasties rise, inheriting the lessons of Akkad. The kings of Uri, Stablia, unified kingdom, learning from both the successes and the failures of their predecessors. To prevent the old disputes that plagued the city-states, they introduce a new innovation, the Kudru, or boundary stone. These are not mere markers, but sacred objects, carved with the symbols of the gods who bear witness to the land grant. They are public, permanent records, placed in temples, declaring ownership and royal authority for all to see. A farmer tilling his field could look upon the Kuduru and know that his claim was guaranteed not just by the king, but by the cosmic order itself. It is a way of writing law into the very landscape. The voice of power now echoes through eternity on stone and clay. Royal inscriptions become more than simple records of deeds. They are carefully crafted narratives, propaganda designed to cement a king's legacy. They recount glorious victories, pious temple constructions, and acts of justice. These stories are carved onto statues, cylinder seals, and palace walls, ensuring that the king's version of history is the one that endures. They speak of a world brought into order by a divinely favored ruler, a shepherd protecting his flock from chaos. Each inscription is a stone thrown into the pond of time, its ripples spreading far beyond the monarch's own life, shaping the memory of his reign for generations to come. Yet, beyond the grand pronouncements on stone, a more intimate story unfolds on small tablets of clay. The empire is held together not just by force, but by a constant stream of communication. Letters, enclosed in clay envelopes and impressed with the sender's personal seal, travel across the kingdom. Messengers on foot and by boat carry missives between the royal court and provincial governors. These letters are the nervous system of the empire, transmitting orders, reporting on harvests, requesting troops, and detailing the intricate dance of diplomacy. A governor in a far-flung city receives a tablet from the king and knows his will directly. A merchant negotiates a deal with a partner hundreds of miles away. These humble clay letters are the threads that stitch the court to the countryside, the capital to the provinces, creating a web of information and authority that is the true, hidden structure of the empire. Through them we hear the daily hum of a civilization, the worries, the commands, and the ambitions that animated this ancient world. In the heart of the city, under the watchful gaze of the gods, Hammurabi established a new kind of order. His code of laws, inscribed for all to see, was not merely a list of rules, but a vision for society. Carved into a tall, black diorit stela, it was a public declaration of justice. At the very top of this stele, a scene is depicted. Frozen in time, Hammurabi stands, his hand raised in a gesture of respect, before the enthroned figure of Shamash, the sun god, the god of justice. Shamash, with rays of light emanating from his shoulders, extends to Hammurabi a ring and a rod, symbols of divine authority and the power to measure and build a just society. This was not a king imposing his will, but a ruler receiving a mandate from the heavens, a shepherd guided by the gods to protect his flock. The laws that followed below this image covered everything from commerce and property to family and crime, weaving a fabric of stability that would endure for generations. It was a promise, set in stone, that justice was not arbitrary, but a fundamental principle of the cosmos itself, accessible to all who could look upon it. The lifeblood of Babylon pulsed with the rhythm of its religious rites, the most important of which was the Akichu, the New Year festival. This 12-day celebration, held each spring, was a grand drama that reenacted the creation of the universe. It was a festival centered on Marduk, the city's patron deity, who rose to become the king of all gods. During the Akitu, the king's own authority was ritually humbled and then reaffirmed. He would be stripped of his regalia, slapped by the high priest, and forced to profess his innocence before Marduk's statue, a powerful reminder that even the most powerful mortal was subject to divine will. The festival culminated in a grand procession, where the statue of Marduk, along with those of other gods, was carried from his temple, along the sacred processional way, out through the Ishtar Gate, to a special festival house outside the city walls. This journey symbolized Marduk's mythical battle against the sea monster Tiamat, his victory, and the subsequent ordering of the cosmos. For the people of Babylon, this was not just a story, it was a renewal of the world itself, ensuring the fertility of the land and the stability of the kingdom for the year to come. At the heart of the sacred precinct, next to the great Esagila temple, stood a structure that would echo through history. The Ziggurat, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. This colossal stepped tower, reaching towards the sky, was more than just an architectural marvel. It was a symbolic link, a man-made mountain connecting the earthly realm with the celestial plane. It is this very structure that is widely believed to be the inspiration for the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel. But for the Babylonians, it was not an act of hubris, but one of piety. It was a staircase for the gods, a place where the divine could descend to the earth, and where humanity could, in a way, ascend to meet them. The structure likely had 7 tiers, each painted a different color, representing the planets or different celestial bodies known at the time. Climbing the Ziggurat was a spiritual journey, a symbolic ascent through the layers of the cosmos. At each summit, a small shrine was said to have stood, a sacred space reserved for the most intimate communion between the divine and the mortal world, a beacon at the very center of their universe. Imagine walking through this ancient metropolis. Your path is not dirt or rough stone, but a magnificent avenue paved with kiln-fired bricks glazed to brilliant, deep blue. This was the processional way, a sacred corridor that cut through the heart of Babylon. The walls lining this grand street were not bare. They were adorned with some of the most stunning art of the ancient world. Rows upon rows of lions, bulls, and dragons, crafted from molded bricks, glazed in vibrant yellows, whites, and blues. The lion, symbol of the goddess Ishtar, goddess of love and war, was depicted in striding profile, its muscles rippling, mouth open in a silent roar. There were over 100 of these powerful figures, guardians of the sacred path. Further along, one would see the bull, symbol of the weather god Adad, and the mythical Mushkusha dragon, a composite creature sacred to the city's chief god, Marduk. Walking this path, especially during the Akitu festival, was an immersive experience. The brilliant colors and powerful animal iconography were designed to overwhelm the senses, to communicate the immense power and wealth of the city and its divine patrons. It was a journey through a living gallery, a testament to a civilization that understood the power of art to shape belief and inspire. Babylon was not just a collection of buildings and streets. It was a carefully constructed model of the universe, a cosmic map laid out on the earthly plane. The city was bisected by the mighty Euphrates River, mirroring the celestial river that was thought to divide the heavens. The city's main districts were named after, and oriented towards, the major regions of their known world, such as Assyria and Elam, placing Babylon at the absolute center of existence. The Itamananki Ziggurat, the foundation of heaven and earth, served as the vertical axis, the cosmic pillar linking the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. The Esagila temple complex, dedicated to Marduk, was the divine heart, the point from which order and creation emanated. Even the city's outer and inner walls had names imbued with cosmic significance. Like the enemy is repulsed, every gate, every temple, every major avenue was placed with intention, reflecting a celestial blueprint. To live in Babylon was to live within a divine order made manifest. The city was a constant, physical reminder of the gods' power and the structure of the cosmos they had created. It was an environment designed to align human life with the rhythms of the heavens, making the city itself a sacred space, a microcosm of the entire universe. Welcome back to our journey through the echoes of time. Tonight, we drift into the heart of an empire built not just on conquest, but on a grand vision of order and knowledge. Assyria, let us find ourselves walking the streets of its final, magnificent capital, Nineveh. Imagine a city so vast its walls seem to touch the horizon, a sprawling metropolis on the eastern bank of the Tigris. This was Nineveh, the exceeding great city of the Bible, a testament to the power of kings like Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal. Its grand avenues were not merely streets, but corridors of power, designed for triumphal processions and the efficient movement of armies and administrators. The very layout of the city was a statement, a grid of control and magnificence carved into the landscape. Palaces rose like man-made mountains, their gates guarded by colossal lamassu, those winged bulls with human heads, silent, eternal sentinels, watching over the comings and goings of an empire. Step inside one of these palaces, perhaps the palace without rival built by Sin. The air grows cooler, the light dimmer. The walls here do not stand bare. They are covered in immense panels of alabaster, carved with scenes of breathtaking detail. These are the famous Assyrian reliefs, but they are not static art. They are narratives in stone, a continuous story that unspools along the corridors. Here you'll see the king on a lion hunt, his chariot thundering, his bow drawn taut. The muscles of the lions are rendered with an almost painful realism, capturing their power and their agony. This was not just sport. It was a royal duty, a symbolic victory of order over chaos. Follow the carved tapestry further. The scenes shift to war. You see Assyrian soldiers scaling enemy walls on ladders, archers letting loose a storm of arrows, and siege engines, the pinnacle of their military technology, battering down city gates. The faces of the conquered are etched with fear and despair, while the Assyrians are a disciplined, relentless force. These reliefs were not just decoration, they were a form of psychological warfare, and a historical record meant to awe visiting dignitaries and remind all who saw them of the inescapable reach of the Assyrian king. They were the empire's story, told not in words, but in stone that moved and breathed with life and power. This power radiated outwards from Nineveh along an impressive network of roads. The royal road was the artery of the empire, a highway for messengers, merchants, and armies. Stations were set up at regular intervals, where fresh horses and supplies were always ready. A message from a distant province could reach the king in Nineveh with astonishing speed, allowing the central government to respond quickly to rebellions or border threats. The empire was divided into provinces, each governed by a loyal appointee who collected tribute and maintained order. This system of roads and provinces was the skeleton that held the vast body of the empire together, a marvel of ancient administration that ensured tribute, troops, and information flowed steadily back to the heart. But the strength of Assyria was not only in its soldiers and stones. Within the courts of Nineveh, another kind of power was cultivated, the power of knowledge. The Assyrian kings, particularly the later ones, were not just warriors. They were patrons of scholarship. They surrounded themselves with an elite group of expert scribes, astronomers, physicians, and diviners who were the intellectual engine of the empire. These scholars were not cloistered academics. Their work was intensely practical. Astronomers observed the heavens, not just out of curiosity, but to interpret omens for the king. Their detailed observations of celestial events, recorded on clay tablets, laid some of the earliest foundations for the science of astronomy. They charted the movements of planets and stars, believing that the fate of the king and the empire was written in the night sky. Diviners interpreted dreams and the entrails of sacrificial animals, seeking to understand the will of the gods and advise the king on the most auspicious course of action. Physicians compiled texts listing ailments and their prescribed remedies, a mixture of practical herbal medicine and magical incantations. Every aspect of life, from the timing of a military campaign to the treatment of a fever, was subject to scholarly inquiry and divine consultation. This fusion of science, magic, and religion was the framework through which the Assyrians understood their world, a system designed to manage uncertainty and secure the favor of the gods for the empire. And at the center of this intellectual world was its most enduring legacy, the great library of Imagine a room not filled with scrolls of papyrus, but with shelves neatly stacked with hundreds of thousands of clay tablets. This was Ashurbanipal's great ambition, to collect all the knowledge of the world. He sent scribes across Mesopotamia to copy and acquire texts of every kind. Here, inscribed in the delicate wedge-shaped script of cuneiform, were the great epics of the past, like the tale of Gilgamesh and his quest for immortality. Here were law codes, royal chronicles, and diplomatic letters. But there was so much more. There were dictionaries and grammatical texts, essential for training new generations of scribes. There were mathematical tablets, with calculations for land measurement and construction, and there were thousands of omen texts, meticulously recording every conceivable event: the birth of a malformed animal, the appearance of a strange fungus, the pattern of oil on water and its predicted meaning. Medical texts listed hundreds of plants and minerals and their uses in treating illness. This was not a library in our modern sense, but a vast archive of tradition, a repository of the accumulated wisdom and anxieties of millennia. Each tablet was a vessel of knowledge, a small piece of fired clay holding the secrets of the cosmos, the history of kings and the cures for human suffering, all sleeping silently in the heart of the world's greatest city. The library was the empire's memory, its mind, a conscious effort to master the world, not just with the sword, but with a stylus. In the soft glow of dawn, the marketplace slowly stirs to life. It's more than just a place of commerce. It's a living network, an intricate dance of supply and demand that seems almost to breathe. A brewer, wiping his hands on his apron, gauges the warmth of the air. He knows, not from charts or graphs, but from a lifetime of observation, precisely how the day's heat will affect his fermentation. His beer is a quiet science, a careful balance of grain, water, and yeast, perfected through generations. Each batch is a testament to an inherited wisdom, a subtle understanding of microbiology long before the word existed. He sells his wares, his reputation built not on advertising, but on the consistent quality of his craft, a currency of trust exchanged with every clay mug. Nearby, a merchant unrolls a clay tablet, its surface covered in the precise, wedge-shaped marks of a contract. In the world of households and agreements, a person's word is their bond. But these tablets are the bedrock of commerce and social order. They are not merely records of transactions. They are promises solidified, relationships defined. A marriage contract details the union of two families, outlining dowries and responsibilities with the care of a legal scholar. A loan agreement between neighbors is etched with the same gravity. This system of accountability, this shared understanding of obligation, is a sophisticated form of social technology. It allows for complex planning and cooperation, ensuring that a community can build and thrive on a foundation of mutual assurance, a quiet intelligence that holds society together. In a quiet corner of a courtyard, a healer tends to a feverish child. She doesn't speak of germs or viruses, but of balance and spirits. Her hands, calloused from grinding herbs, move with a gentle certainty. She murmurs an incantation, a soft-spoken rhythm that is both a prayer and a form of focused intention. To an outsider, it might seem like mere superstition, but within her community, she is a pillar of knowledge. She knows which roots soothe a cough, which leaves reduce a fever, and which flowers calm an anxious heart. Her incantations are a psychological comfort, a way to soothe the mind while her remedies work on the body. This is a holistic practice, a blend of pharmacology, psychology, and faith, passed down from mother to daughter, an unbroken chain of care and wisdom. As evening drapes the sky in shades of purple and orange, a different kind of scholar looks upward. He is a sky watcher, a keeper of the celestial records. For him, the heavens are not just a beautiful spectacle, they're a vast, unfolding text. He meticulously notes the movements of the moon and the visible planets, compiling long lists known as omen series. A ring around the moon might foretell rain, while the position of a planet at a certain time of year could signal a bountiful harvest or a potential flood. This is not fortune-telling in the modern sense, but a systematic attempt to find patterns, to understand the universe's grand rhythms and how they connect to life on Earth. It is an early form of astronomy and data analysis, a patient, long-term observation of the cosmos that lays the groundwork for future scientific inquiry. Down by the river, the lifeblood of the city, A craftsman carefully shapes a piece of wood. He is a boat builder, and his knowledge is as deep and flowing as the water itself. He understands the character of different woods, which one resists rot, which one bends without breaking. He doesn't use blueprints, but works from a mental template refined over countless constructions. His hands know the precise angle to join two planks, the exact tension needed for a rope. His craft is a physical intelligence, a dialogue between material and maker. Soon, his creation will be guided by a river pilot, another master of hidden knowledge. The pilot doesn't navigate by maps, but by an intimate familiarity with the river's every mood. He reads the water's surface, the ripples that betray a hidden sandbar, the subtle change in color that indicates a deeper channel. He knows the currents in the dry season and during the flood. He listens to the wind and watches the birds, using 1,000 small clues to guide his vessel safely. This is a science of the senses, a deep, practical ecology learned through years of immersion. His skill is what connects distant towns, allowing trade and communication to flow. It is a quiete-essential intelligence, moving silently along the water, carrying the life of the civilization with it, an unseen current of profound and practical knowledge. The great cities of Assyria, once the terror of the world, fall silent. Nineveh, a name that echoed with power, succumbs not to a single cataclysm, but to the slow, relentless tide of time and change. The empire, stretched thin and brittle, fractures. Its palaces, adorned with tales of conquest, are reclaimed by dust and whispers. Yet, in this twilight, a new dawn breaks over Babylon. Under Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon rises again, a jewel on the plains of Mesopotamia. Its walls, wide enough for chariots to race upon, enclose a city of dazzling splendor. The Ishtar Gate, a breathtaking vision of deep blue glazed brick, welcomes processions with its dragons and bulls, guardians of a city reborn. The famed Hanging Gardens, a wonder of the ancient world, are said to have been a lush Terra Sid Paradise, a mountain of green in the flat riverlands. Built for a homesick queen, life pulses through its streets, a vibrant tapestry of commerce, scholarship, and faith. But even this golden age is fleeting. The lost king of an independent Babylon, Nabonidus, is a curious figure. He is less a warrior, more a scholar, an antiquarian king obsessed with the distant past. He excavates the foundations of old temples, not for treasure, but for knowledge. Seeking out the foundation deposits of long-dead rulers, he pores over ancient inscriptions, trying to piece together a history that was already ancient to him. While his kingdom faces the growing shadow of Persia from the east, Nabonidus is lost in the ghosts of Sumer and Akkad. Was he a pious restorer of forgotten traditions, or a ruler detached from the pressing realities of his time? The question hangs in the quiet air of history. Then, Cyrus the Great and his Persian armies arrive. Babylon, the eternal city, opens its gates, and a new chapter begins. The Persian Empire, vast and tolerant, absorbs Mesopotamia into its realm. The old ways continue, but under new masters. Aramaic, a simpler script and language, spreads through the empire, becoming the tongue of administration and daily life. Cuneiform, the beautiful, complex script of clay, begins its long, slow retreat. It becomes the domain of priests and astronomers, guardians of sacred texts and celestial charts, who continue to meticulously record the movements of the heavens. For centuries, they watched the stars from the tops of Ziggurats, their styluses pressing the final, fading whispers of a 3,000-year-old tradition into soft clay. Alexander's conquests bring a new wave of change. Greek culture and language, Hellenism, wash over the ancient lands. New cities, like Seleucia, are founded on the Tigris, and Greek becomes the language of the elite. Cuneiform clings to life in the old temples of Babylon and Uruk, a flicker in the wind. The last known cuneiform tablets, dated to the 1st century, are not grand royal edicts, but astronomical almanacs. The final voices of Sumer and Akkad, of Assyria and Babylon, are not telling tales of gods and kings, but charting the silent, eternal dance of the stars. Then, silence. The knowledge is lost. The script becomes a mystery, the wedge-shaped marks on crumbling tablets, an indecipherable code. The cities themselves are buried, their names surviving only in the texts of their rivals and in the Bible, becoming places of myth and legend. For nearly 2,000 years, the voices of Mesopotamia slept beneath the sands. Then, in the 19th century, a new breed of explorer and scholar arrived. Men like Henry Rowlandson, clinging to a sheer cliff face in Persia to copy the Behistun inscription, began the painstaking work of They discovered that the strange wedges were not one script, but many, recording different languages. Slowly, painstakingly, the code was broken. The voices, silent for millennia, began to speak again. First, the tales of Assyrian kings, then the laws of Hammurabi, and finally, the astonishing discovery of a flood story that predated the biblical account by 1,000 years. The Epic of Gilgamesh. The world listened, stunned, as a civilization thought lost to myth was reborn in stunning detail. We could read their letters, their receipts, their poems, their prayers. We learned of their hopes, their fears, their complex understanding of the universe. Even now, mysteries remain. Countless tablets lie unread in museum drawers around the world. What stories do they hold? What secrets of science? What forgotten myths? What intimate details of daily life are waiting to be read? The voices of ancient Mesopotamia, once resurrected from dust and silence, have not yet told us all they know. They wait, patiently, in the quiet of the clay, for us to listen once more. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of the written word, a whisper across the abyss of time, reminding us that no voice is ever truly lost forever. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the echoes of time. If you've enjoyed this exploration into the quiet corners of history, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support allows these stories to be told. Until we meet again, may your nights be filled with peaceful dreams and wondrous thoughts. Sleep well.